Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm pleased to be here alongside Jason Nixon, who's our Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Jody Gondek, Mayor of Calgary, Ruben Breaker, Councillor of Siksika Nation, Steve Dongworth, the Chief of the Calgary Fire Department, Katie McClellan, the Deputy Chief of the Calgary Police Service, Patricia Jones, President and CEO of Calgary Homeless Foundation, Major Rob Kerr, Divisional Secretary of the Salvation Army, and a number of other partners who have joined us here today. Our government wants to do all we can to help and to heal Albertans struggling with homelessness and addiction and mental health challenges. Most people will never experience the pain and hardship of living rough, but the reality for those who do is cold and lonely and dangerous. Unfortunately, this is the case for far too many people in Calgary, and not only here in the cities, but across Alberta and across Canada. We won't turn our backs on Alberta's most vulnerable citizens. We won't turn a blind eye to the criminals who prey on them, and we won't allow misery and despair to have a home in our cities. Leaving people to suffer is not compassion, it's cruelty. It's indifference to suffering, it's giving up. And that's not something that our government can support. We have a solution, and we know it works. In Edmonton, 7 ministries joined with local social service agencies and Indigenous leaders to create Alberta's first navigation and support center. This is a safe central location where people exiting encampments can access the services they need to break the cycle and to rebuild their lives. As part of our recovery-oriented system of care, the Navigation and Support Center brings existing services under one roof. And those who formerly stayed in encampments and anyone experiencing homelessness can access the supports they need quickly and simply. The center has proven so effective that we decided to make it permanent. In the first 3 weeks after it opened on January 16th to February 9th, we were able to help 220 people as they left encampments. But since then, there have been a total of 1,850 people who have gone through the center. Edmonton Center has done life-saving and life-changing work. For example, the center was able to help a refugee from Africa who had lost her housing. She had 2 children and was in desperate straits. Staff were able to set her up with income supports and to get her into a hotel before she moved on to transitional housing. One man who'd been sleeping rough with his dog in cold weather came in with frostbite on his feet, and the center was able to accommodate him and his dog so that he could get the emergency care that he needed. And an Indigenous woman asked to be reconnected with her sister. When workers reached out to her sister, they learned that the woman's family had believed she was missing and likely dead for over a decade. We want to see more successes with these kinds of interventions, and I'm so pleased to announce that we will be adding a similar navigation and support center here in Calgary. We'll staff the center with people trained in healthcare and housing and shelter supports and Indigenous supports. Clients will receive proper medical care for their wounds and referrals for mental health and addiction treatment. They will find the stability of secure living arrangements. They'll get connections to financial and employment services, and they'll get ID immediately so that they can start accessing supports in the future and make that easier. All of these services will mean a path to a better life for more Calgarians, and I'm grateful to all of our partners who are working with us on Calgary's Navigation and Support Center. This openness to new solutions testifies to everyone's compassion and your determination to resolve the crises that are damaging so many lives. I'm looking forward to the stories of recovery that will come from this center, and with your help, we will make that happen. And now I would like to invite Minister Jason Nixon to the podium to say more.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Premier, special guest, Mayor, I should mention as well. Thank you for being here today for what I think is a really exciting announcement in regards to the work that we're doing across the province when it comes to homelessness. I do want to take a quick moment and actually start with housing. You know, we are seeing some real challenges across our country when it comes to housing, no different here in our province. And we've been working tirelessly to address our housing crisis here in Alberta. We're investing over $9 billion over the next 10 years between now and 2031 to create another 82,000 affordable households. We've already built 5,000 new affordable housing units since this government came into power. I announced $840 million the other day to be able to create another 5,100 units of affordable housing in our province. And of course, we've also increased our rent supplements by about $250 million. The reality is, though, as we focus on the housing crisis, we have to make sure that we don't lose sight of those who are also who do not have a home, but are not homeless as a result of the housing crisis, but are homeless as a result of other circumstances that may be taking place in their life, where housing is the cure for that homelessness. But the reality that individuals may find themselves in the streets with this demographic we're talking about today is often probably because of addictions and mental health and other components that need to be addressed to be able to ultimately make sure that they have success. And this is why the Premier has instructed me and my other departments that work with me, like mental health and addictions particularly, but also health, to really focus on emergency shelter and how emergency shelter connects to the recovery programs that we're building in Alberta and how that will connect ultimately into long-term housing solutions, but not to lose sight of the fact that we have to work with the homeless population in these circumstances in different ways to be able to make sure that they have success. And that's why our government is investing actually record amounts in things like emergency housing right now in our province. I'm proud to be part of a department that this year is going to invest just shy of $250 million of taxpayer money across the province in emergency shelter, in partnership sometimes with places like the Calgary Homeless Foundation, and of course directly to our nonprofit organizations to be able to create what is a record amount of shelter spaces. In Calgary, over 2,000 emergency shelter spaces now online, which is the most in the history of the province and in the history of the city. We've also focused on doing shelter differently. That's one of the instructions I have from my boss, the Premier, to look at ways that we can adapt shelter to the changing circumstances that we see on the streets here inside our province. And that's why we've added things like women-only shelter spaces, not to be confused with domestic violence shelter spaces, which are important, but making sure that we create emergency shelter components for women only, where they can feel safe and secure. Family shelter units, which we've done with our partners with In for the Cold here inside the city of Calgary to make sure families can come into shelter together in circumstances where that is needed. And of course, our Indigenous-run only shelters, which we have opened now recently in Edmonton with our partnership with Enoch Cree First Nation, and we are getting ready to open up in the city of Calgary to be able to make sure that we have an Indigenous-focused component working with our homeless population. We have culturally appropriate services working with that demographic. And the biggest investment, making sure that all of our shelter spaces are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is a significant investment by the province and our partners to be able to make sure there's full access to services for those who find themselves on the streets for whatever those circumstances will be. Also during the last year, we decided in Edmonton to help at the request of the City of Edmonton and the Edmonton Police Service with an encampment crisis that they were having in the City of Edmonton. I do want to pause there and recognize that the City of Calgary, from I think great management by the city and their partners, as well as the Calgary Police Service and the Calgary Fire Department, have not found themselves in the same situation that we saw taking place in Edmonton. Since January of this year, we worked with the City of Edmonton to dismantle over 700 encampments where there were some significant violent circumstances taking place. People were being abused, people were losing their lives as a result of fires and different circumstances that were happening in those encampments. The City of Calgary has worked hard to be able to manage encampments in a compassionate way already. I'm not saying there's no encampments in Calgary, but there has not been the same circumstances. In fact, we see more challenges probably on C trains and on public transit and other areas that we hope with our navigation center will work on. But as a result of the request of the City of Edmonton, we made a decision to open up the Edmonton Navigation Center. At the time, it was a plan, because the Premier had told us to solve the problem, to deal directly with those encampments. But within weeks, we knew that we had stumbled upon what was a better solution for the City of Edmonton. Our nonprofit partners liked it. My department was shocked at the results that we were getting, and we saw a tremendous amount of success. The Premier's spoken about some of that success, but I'll give you a couple statistics. 1,850 unique visitors to that navigation center since January 17th, 2024. More than 1,245 pieces of ID have been received by individuals who went to the Navigation Center. That's a big deal. My colleagues who still work with the homeless population know that one of the largest challenges to getting services for our homeless population is IDs. And we were able to bring in Service Alberta. My colleague Dale Nally, who's the Minister of Service Alberta, he was able to come up with solutions in our Navigation Center that got ID immediately. On-site ID in hands, no wait, which was absolutely critical going forward. In fact, the rest of us can't get ID that fast, so I'm not encouraging everybody to go to the Navigation Center to get their ID in the future, but it's pretty impressive what we've accomplished. Also, more than 1,000 people were referred to housing or shelter supports. Of that, 97% remained housed still, which is a number that I am significantly the most proud of, because I think that ultimately is the goal. We've also been able to get about 800 people towards financial benefits, like income supports that my department already provides, things like AISH and barriers to employment and other income supports, to allow that to be a tool to be able to help those individuals. And over 550 of them directly connected to some sort of health service, which right there at the Navigation Center, we can get them. In case of Edmonton, we partner with Radius Health. At our Navigation Center here, we're going to partner with CUPS, but we can get them directly to healthcare services immediately in our province. And then lastly, the last number I'd say is almost that I'd like to draw your attention to, I should say, is 350 people transported to places like home. And the story that the Premier told about the missing Indigenous women that came into the shelter, can you imagine that? After a decade, thinking that your daughter, your sister, your cousin was probably murdered, that all of a sudden you get a phone call and they went through that Navigation Center and they returned to their home community, which was in rural Alberta, but to addiction services. And I checked this morning, that individual is still receiving services and well on their way to recovery. And so that's why today I'm excited, as the Premier said, to announce that we will be opening up a Navigation Center here in Calgary, similar to what we've done in Edmonton. We are in it right now. This will be its location. Construction should be finished by the first week of July. We are pushing the department. I can tell you the Premier is pushing the department very hard to make sure that happens. Inside that Navigation Center, we will have overnight beds that will be available for people as they go through that process to be transported to other locations. We will have the ID services. We're going to have employment and financial services, mental health and addiction supports. CUPS will be here doing healthcare support. We'll, of course, be doing housing referrals and shelter referrals, as well as culturally appropriate supports with our Indigenous partners. And, of course, things as simple as access to washrooms, showers, food, and coffee as we start that process to be able to help. This will be also a spot that, of course, homeless people will be able to come. It's in a great location on their own. And we see that organically now happening in Edmonton as the word spreads about what the Navigation Center has been doing. People are coming into the center on their own. But this will also be a place where our emergency services, both police, fire, health officials, and other organizations that are encountering homeless people that need to get access to services can bring and know that if you bring an individual here, that we will be able to get wraparound services around those individuals. I will say that why I think, the Premier asked me the last time we had a press conference on this, why I think that this works, why what we have seen take place in Edmonton works, because in some ways it's very simple. And I reflect back to my time when I worked at the Mustard Seed here in Calgary, and I worked with the homeless population here in the city. We used to give out a thing called the Street Survival Guide. I can't remember exactly what it was called. I know I see a lot of my former colleagues nodding their heads, so they know what I'm talking about. And you would hand it out, and in that guide, you'd have a description of all the different agencies that were in the city. And if you're trying to help somebody get income supports, or trying to get them on AISH, or trying to get them in a housing program, you would be on that guide and you'd tell them, hey, you got to go to here. You got to go to this organization. They'll help you with this. And then on the other side of downtown is this organization. They'll help you with this. We are now taking all of that together, the power of all the government ministries that are involved, the resources of it, together with our nonprofit partners, and bringing that into one location where we take that individual to those services, and they will receive those full wraparound services. And I think that's critical. You know, my father, as many of you that are here today will know, came to this city in the early 1970s as a homeless person. He was about 15 years old when he arrived here. It's a long story about how that took place. He came from rural BC, interior BC, where he lived on the street since he was about 11 years old. And he found himself living in this city with no resources, no idea how to access resources, with a severe addiction in a terrible set of circumstances. And a group of people that were associated with the Burning Bush, which was a little organization operating in the basement of First Baptist Church here on 4th Street in downtown Calgary, they found him, and they took him to all those services. They were able to eventually get him to addiction supports and on to housing and all those components. Dad would recover. He would go on to raise a family of 6 boys. 2 of them would go on to become the social services minister of this province. And of course, he would also go on to start the Mustard Seed Street Ministry, which is celebrating, I believe, its 41st year. I know their CEO is here today. Welcome. And that's 41 years of being able to care for the poor in our province as a result of that decision to get the supports around that individual. And what we are truly trying to accomplish with our Navigation Center is exactly that, where we will bring together our nonprofit partners, our ministries, the Ministry of Social Services, as well as our sister ministries like health and mental health and addictions, and make sure we can get all of those supports around people so they can access those supports, and then they can go on to lead successful and happy lives. And I'm looking forward, as the Premier said, to hearing all the great stories that I already know are going to come as a result of this Navigation Center opening today. And I'd like to just close again with thanking my department, as well as the Department of Health and the Department of Mental Health and Addictions in particular, along with our nonprofit partners, and there are a lot of them that are working to be able to make sure we can stand up this Navigation Center, which I truly believe will be an example that other provinces will start to copy, because it is working very successfully. I saw the other day that in Saskatoon that they will be opening up a navigation center similar to what has taken place in Edmonton. So we have an opportunity truly to be able to care for the most vulnerable in our community here in Calgary and across the province. But we also have an opportunity to be able to teach as an example to the rest of the country, and I think revolutionize the way that we care for the homeless and be able to make sure that they receive the services they need long term. So thank you again for being here. And with that said, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Mayor Gondek, who, without a partnership with the city, something that we're talking about here with this Navigation Center would not work. And I know I'm looking forward to hearing her words today. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Minister. And on behalf of my Calgary City Council colleagues, Oki, Daranistata, Ambawastich, and Tanse, these are greetings to all of you in the mother languages of the Treaty 7 peoples. This is an important announcement today. This is a way that we can help people in positions of extreme vulnerability. And as the Premier and the Minister have outlined, it's an opportunity to have all services located in one place. If you think about your own life and how difficult it is to go out and get your driver's license renewed, or go and figure out where you might need to rent a place, it's not easy to do. Navigating the system is not easy. And then I want you to imagine that you don't have a home, or that you are struggling with mental illness. How are you going to accomplish this on your own? And the answer is you can't. So we need supportive services like the ones that are being planned. And I'm grateful that the provincial government has come forward and said that this is something that they would like to do in our city. And I really want to thank our partners at the Calgary Police Service and the Calgary Fire Department for stepping up to the challenge that we have had with an increasing number of individuals being in positions of crisis, suffering through trauma. These two organizations have done their very best to help those folks. And to all of the housing providers and social service providers in our city that have done their very best to help people, I know that they will be grateful to have this single location that is going to be able to help so many Calgarians in need. And we are also very aware that the Indigenous population is overrepresented in the statistics that we hear every day. And when I think about the job that we can do in serving Indigenous peoples in our city by having a location like this, where people can get referrals for mental health and addictions treatment, for housing, and they can get identification, which is just such a basic thing to access anything you need, I'm really pleased that we're going to be able to offer this. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Councillor Ruben Breaker from Siksika Nation.
Hokia, the Stuanagoka Snapuka, the Doomstu Siksika. Iksugapi, Nixi Ugaxkumek, Expumos Nixi, Kistunok Nitsitapi. Hello, my name is Councillor Ruben Breaker. I'm from Siksika Nation. And I said what I said in my language. It is really good that we have two governments helping our people. A place like this is going to help a lot of our people who have been in dark places. And as somebody who has survived that lifestyle, it's hard to explain the feeling of being homeless, of being addicted, having that thought that there's no way out. You know, I worked in addictions back home, and it was tough. This was 9-10 years ago, before being in leadership. The generic, systemic processes that are changing now, I had to send our relatives to this agency, just to get services. And I'm so glad to hear about the ID solution, because that's one of the toughest barriers I remember when I changed my life years ago, I had nothing. Not even an ID, not even a wallet. And the places I went to help, you needed IDs to get ID. That's how far we've come with this resource. So as a recovering alcoholic addict, it's so good to see that there are choices now. Our vulnerable relatives, they could come to a safe place and be guided to choices. 10 years ago, it was black or white. Go to treatment, that's it. And when I talk about those systemic processes, sometimes we had to wait 3 to 6 months just to get into treatment. And we lose our people while they wait for treatment. So something like this and some of the resources that are already in place within the city of Calgary and surrounding areas, like pre-treatment housing and all these other resources, is so crucial, because removing ourselves from the environment is very key. So we have a very slim margin to give, I'm going to say our people, but it doesn't matter. Addictions doesn't care. Skin color, race, gender, age. Addiction doesn't care. But something like this, anybody could come and be provided resources. I'm just looking back, thinking that's such a huge sigh of relief, knowing that we have a safe place to come. So I'm so honored to be part of a task force that the GOA has put together, and to be working with great people within the city of Calgary and the government to help find a solution. Because out there, a lot of people focus on the problem. We don't talk about solutions. But it's little initiatives like this that are going to be big. It's about working together. And I really like the concept of having this resource and other resources 24/7. Because addictions, they don't punch out at 4:30. Drug dealers don't punch out at 4:30, Monday to Friday. It's a 24/7 thing. So I'm so grateful to speak on behalf of our First Nations people who are vulnerable in the streets of Moginstis. And there's so other good agencies out there that are trying to help, but something like this, I can't imagine, I don't want to go back to where I was, but, having a place like this and really feeling comfortable. So it warms my spirit to know that something like this is coming into place in the city with great partnerships with the city and the government. Is it going to be perfect? No. But at least it's something. And that's all we could do is try. Don't give up on our people. So with that, I'd like to call upon the Fire Chief for Moginstis, Steve Bongworth.
Premier Smith and Minister Nixon, thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. As first responders, the Calgary Fire Department is called upon to provide support to those in need. Often, that involves providing life-saving medical care out of our busiest stations, stations 1, 2, and 6, which are located right here in the downtown area. In response to the growing calls for medical care downtown, we recently put our medical response units into service at 2 of these stations. Our medical response units respond to approximately 600 calls every month, with the majority of those calls aiding some of Calgary's most vulnerable population. While we provide exceptional medical care, we also have the opportunity to connect people with the resources they need while we're on those calls. The Navigation Center provides another resource for us to share with people who may benefit from the resources offered here. And I can tell you, for the 1,650 caring folks that work for the Calgary Fire Department, they will be delighted that there's a wraparound service of this nature added to the existing services to help those most in need get the help they need. Calgary has a strong base of collaboration among city services, including the Calgary Fire Department, the Calgary Police Service, and many community agencies. We're confident the Navigation Centre will bring another piece to the puzzle of supporting our most vulnerable Calgarians. We look forward to continuing to work with our city and provincial partners to work with that support all Calgarians in living with dignity, compassion, and connection. And with that, I'd invite Deputy Chief Katie McClellan from Calgary Police Service to come and say a few words.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and good afternoon, everyone. Like all Calgarians, we see firsthand the impact homelessness, addiction, and mental health crisis have on members of our community. We know it takes a collaborative approach to address the complex social issues that are affecting Calgarians, and the service welcomes the Government of Alberta's Navigation and Support Centre as a new resource to serve vulnerable Calgarians who need support. Every single day, our members engage with the most vulnerable members of the community, who I have no doubt will benefit from the services and supports provided by the centre, as Chief Dongworth also shared. This centre will benefit our frontline, as it is yet another opportunity for our members to assist those experiencing mental health and addiction-related crises. We have been working closely with our provincial and municipal governments and community partners to lift Calgarians out of crisis, and this Navigation and Support Centre ensures Calgarians have access to needed resources. We are committed to continuing our collaboration with government and community partners to support the community by providing the right resource to the right person at the right time. Thank you very much, and I'd like to welcome my friend and colleague, Patricia Jones, the CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation.
Well, you must be glad this is almost over. I'm the last speaker, which is very appropriate today, but if you're doing a tug of war, as Minister Nixon reminded me, you would want to be a Kim to be the last in the lineup. So good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you, Premier Smith, for your steadfast support in ensuring the well-being of all Calgarians and for your visionary leadership in fostering collaboration across various service sectors. Thank you. Minister Nixon, I want to thank you for your lifelong dedication to championing innovative approaches such as the Navigation and Support Centre, which signifies a proactive strategy encompassing diversion, prevention, and recovery to combat homelessness. And finally, I want to acknowledge my colleagues in the audience. I have many colleagues over there, and the colleagues behind me. When Minister Nixon talked about the difference between Calgary and Edmonton, you can't compare, it's apples and oranges. Every city has their unique characteristics. But what I can tell you is incredibly special about Calgary are the relationships we all have. We know each other well. We park our egos for purpose. We understand who we're dealing with at the end of the day, people going through dark times. We know each other, we know each other's families. We break bread together. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to accomplish with this Navigation Centre. So the Calgary Homeless Foundation is so very proud to collaborate with the provincial government on the establishment of the Navigation and Support Centre in Calgary, a pivotal and first of its kind initiative providing individuals experiencing homelessness with comprehensive, with barrier-free access to essential services to journey out of homelessness and towards personal recovery. Moreover, I think it's important for all Calgarians to know that the Government of Alberta annually entrusts the Calgary Homeless Foundation with $42 million to allocate resources strategically, responsibly, for maximum impact and outcomes. These resources that are already in Calgary will complement the efforts of the Navigation Centre and bolster the collective work of our community partners, both present here today and beyond. Additionally, the province is making substantial investments in affordable, transitional, and short-term housing solution, recognizing the critical need for stable housing as a foundation for rebuilding lives, because we all deserve the opportunity for a second chance, or a third, or a fourth. Furthermore, in recognition of the unique needs of our Indigenous individuals experiencing homelessness, and Ruben and I did not call each other to see if we would wear the same shirt today, but we did. The province is investing in Indigenous-led and women-only shelters. And finally, in collaboration with us at the Calgary Homeless Foundation, the government is extending support to vulnerable families, recognizing that homelessness often affects not just individuals, but entire families. And they know that a child that is housed becomes an adult who is housed. These investments underscore our shared commitment to tackling homelessness from all angles, with a focus on prevention, intervention, long-term solutions, all through the lens of relationship and humanity and trauma. The Navigation Center signifies a significant stride in addressing the root causes of homelessness, promising enduring, life-altering outcomes for those navigating through some of the darkest times of their life in our city. And I don't think there's a person in this room that could tell me they haven't navigated a dark time in their life. So those are not those people, those are our people, and we all have dark times. I am confident that by fostering collaboration across government departments, which is cutting edge, and community agencies, we can achieve not only better social outcomes, but also greater financial returns. So in closing, let us reaffirm our collective commitment to working hand in hand across sectors, across communities, to tackle homelessness head on. With continued collaboration, partnership, innovation, investment, we can build a brighter future for all Calgarians, ensuring that every individual or family, whether that be a mother or a father or a grandmother or an elder or an aunt or an uncle, or God forbid, a child, has the support that they need to have the life that they want. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers. We're now into the media Q&A portion of the announcement. We'll be taking one question and one follow-up today. We'll start off with reporters here in the room before making our way to the phones. And just a reminder to state your name and outlet before asking your question. And we'll go to our first at the mic.
Scott Strasser from Post Media Calgary. I remember reading that the Edmonton Navigation Center had shuttle access. I'm curious if the Calgary location is going to have something similar. I know that the train is obviously very close to here, but how can people access this site if they aren't already in the area?
So there'll be, in Edmonton, there was a couple things were taking place. Obviously, with the large work on encampments at that time, we partnered with the city of Edmonton to be able to make sure there was transportation from encampment locations to this location. We did that in that case through Edmonton Transportation Services. We anticipate doing something similar here, but likely because of the volume, we won't have to use as much buses, but it would be an opportunity as we work with police, so they are taking down a large encampment. Sometimes if it's a smaller encampment or they're finding people inside the C train or those locations, they will just transport on their own. The chief can speak that better, but they'll know now where to bring somebody. And then I think more importantly is the work that we do to transport individuals from the NAV Center to other locations. And our policy on this location is a warm handoff. And so we will work in partnership often with organizations on what that transportation looks like. It's going to be a different type of transportation depending on where individuals are going. But our goal is with this location that we don't just turn people back out to the streets, that we figure out the appropriate place for them and we warmly hand them off to that organization to care for them.
Thank you. Probably also for Minister Nixon, but you mentioned overnight beds being here. Can you speak to how many there will be or what the capacity will be for this site?
So we will have overnight beds here. In Edmonton, we did 30 overnight beds. Again, anticipating some of the large volume that we saw coming out of encampments at that time. We're gonna do 10 overnight beds here to start, and that seems to be about the number that we would need in general to have somebody stay overnight. Our main goal will be to navigate somebody into a housing circumstance within 24 hours of them coming through the Navigation Center. We're obviously very close to multiple significant shelter providers in the city of Calgary. And I do want to emphasize that the city of Calgary's nonprofit partners that provide shelters are very, very competent and advanced, been long-term partners of the province, and we already really work together to be able to make sure we know where capacity is at in all of their facilities and to get individuals there. So 10 for now. If we think we need more, though, we'll add more spaces.
Sean Polzer, Western Standard. Given that we've got both the mayor and the premier in the room, if you could comment, going back to the recall petition, whether or not it was fair to disqualify every single one of those petition signatures, and what changes maybe would we be looking at in the Municipal Government Act to make the process a little more smooth and a little more fair?
Well, one of the things that we realized wasn't very fair is asking the chief administrative officer of the city, who is an employee of the council, to make the decision to validate the petitions. And so one of the changes that we made in Bill 20 was that that role will be taken on by the Minister of Municipal Affairs. We still have some consultation that we want to do on the threshold for signatures. There were a number of different recall campaigns happening around the province. I think there were 3 or 4, and we wanted to make sure that those were completed. We didn't want to change the rules in between. We're now getting into the window where we're getting close to an election, so by the time the regulations are in place, the window will have closed for a recall petition. You can't have one within, I believe, 6 months of an election, or within 18 months after an election. So we have a little bit more time to consult on that. But the feedback that we got was that we want to be able to have a high threshold, because you don't want to have frivolous petitions launched, but you don't want it so high that it becomes impossible under any circumstances to achieve. We just haven't figured out what that threshold is yet, but I think we addressed one of the issues by ensuring that we don't put a chief administrative officer in an impossible position of essentially having to validate a petition against the very people that they work for. So that will go to the Municipal Affairs Minister, and that's already been passed into law. Did you want to comment, Mayor?
The only thing that I would add is this is legislation that comes down from the province. So as Premier has said, they have looked at some of the issues that exist. I can tell you that not having the Chief Administrative Officer be the point person on this is going to be incredibly relieving for municipalities. And I think it's also important to understand that our team in administration went well above and beyond what they needed to. They could have simply said there's not enough signatures and dismissed everything outright. Instead, what they did, in concert with discussion with the Minister of Municipal Affairs, is said, we will look to verify these if you think that's something we should do. And that's what was undertaken. And you know, you can question whether everything should have been disqualified, but that's not up to me to question. The rules were clear, they were laid out by the provincial government, and unfortunately, they did not meet the test that was established by the province.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, apparently 85,000 NDP memberships have been sold, vast majority in Calgary. What kinds of things do your government have to do to, maybe without getting into the details of their particular leadership race, but how would you react to something like that, say with the City of Calgary, to try and improve your standing here in the city?
Well, look, there's no question that it was a very tough election last time around, and we've got a lot of work to do to be able to win back support. And so we're identifying the issues that we think matter to Calgarians, and we're investing in them. So it's part of the reason we've made public safety such an important priority, homelessness, addiction, mental health. Reforming our healthcare system, addressing issues of affordable housing, addressing issues of building new attainable homes for people. And we'll just let that play out and see what happens in the next election. I'm always up for a robust policy discussion, so I'll look forward to seeing some policy being put on the table so that we can debate it out. But I think we've got some good ideas, and I think people see that we care and that we're the kind of government that's going to identify problems and work together to solve them.
Edith Boisvert, Radio-Canada. Do you know in which languages the services that will be provided here will be? Is it just in English? Will it be in multiple Indigenous languages? And will it be in French?
I didn't expect that question, so I'm actually trying to look for one of my officials in the room to confirm on French. I don't know if anybody from my department's here to confirm that. What I will say, though, is that with the Navigation Center in Edmonton, we have brought in local Indigenous communities from Treaty 6 that are supporting us with making sure that, one, services are culturally appropriate, that we're getting access to culturally appropriate services for Indigenous people who are using the Navigation Center, and that things like culture and traditional medicines and other components are part of that process of Navigation Center. We'll be doing the same thing here, particularly as we bring on our new Indigenous shelters in Calgary. We're not going to announce that today, but they are coming, and they will be a pretty critical component of this. I assume that we're actually not bilingual at the shelter, at the Navigation Shelter, just from the fact that most of our employees probably are not. But certainly, if we were in a circumstance where there was a language barrier, this is the place you'd want to be, because we would then solve that for those individuals. And again, would be a great example, I think not just French, there could be many other languages that could end up in a place like Navigation Center, where our partners would not have the resources necessary to be able to communicate with those individuals. And so by ending up here, that's something that would be identified, and then we could work to get translation services or other things from some of our immigration supports or other components in government.
So there were a lot of mention about encampment and this center being a solution to exiting encampment. Do we have to understand that there will be encampment dismantled in the near future?
I can tell you what happened in Edmonton, and then maybe the deputy chief might want to talk here. In Edmonton, the Edmonton Police Service led the effort of saying that they wanted to clear the encampments. The court said you cannot clear them unless there's a place for people to go, which is why we increased the number of shelter spaces. We went up to about 1,800 shelter beds there. And we're happy to see that I think on any given night, there's no more than 1,425 or so. So we do have extra shelter space. And that's why we knew that when Edmonton Police Service was clearing, that we would be able to have confidence in knowing that there were places for people to go. And that's also the reason why we had transportation, to be able to get people to the Navigation Center. But as I said, in that first 3-week period when the encampments were being cleared, that was about 220 people that came through the Navigation Center. The vast bulk came through afterwards for all the other services. So I should probably let the CPS talk about the nature of the encampment issue in Calgary, because in Edmonton, as I said, I think we're down to less than 30 encampments, but we had well over 700. Do you want to talk, Mayor?
Yeah. Thank you, Premier, and Deputy Chief is up here with me. The one thing that needs to be stressed is this Navigation Center for Calgary is not in response to an encampment issue. Within Calgary, we've got encampment outreach teams. We have a strong partnership between Calgary Police Service and the City of Calgary, as well as many outreach service providers. And so we have found that approaching any encampments that are reported or noticed is a situation where we provide compassionate response and care. We go to the individual or individuals and we ask what it is that they might need at that point in time, and how can we help them get into a housing situation that might be a little bit better for them. And so the compassionate response has worked very well in partnership with CPS, and I'll let you carry on with that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. I think she covered everything, but truly we look at them all individually. We have lots of great proactive partnerships that go out and meet these individuals, have conversations with them. We're not going to be doing anything without communication and conversation, and as the Mayor said, we have lots of partners, lots of collaboration, and we're working hand in hand to ensure that, again, as I said earlier, the right resources to the right people at the right time. So thank you.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I want to give a shout out to the City of Calgary and to the emergency services, as well as the amazing nonprofit sector that has worked so well with the city in Calgary. The challenges that we saw with encampments in Edmonton were very, very different than what was taking place in Calgary. I think a large amount of that is because a lot of that policy work had already been done and implemented. I see the Navigation Center as another tool that will be able to be used by law enforcement, emergency services in the city to be able to get people to those compassionate resources as they're managing encampments, which will be very similar now to what we see in Edmonton as we go to a maintenance of encampment situation taking place in the city, not to the crisis encampment situation that we just finished in the city of Edmonton.
Hannah Said from City News. From what I understand, this is the space where the Navigation Center is going to be, and it's going to open in the first week of July. But what's the exact budget for it? I know 42 million is what the Homeless Foundation is going to get, but for the operations here, what's the exact budget, yearly or for 2-3 years?
We haven't made a final budget determination yet on the Navigation Center. for both cities as we go into the permanency of that program. The reason for that is we got to just make sure that we've staffed up to what we need. And so we'll be watching it very closely. What I can tell you is that it's going to fit within both my current budget as well as the community-based organizations that we partner with. So in the case of Calgary, the Homeless Foundation's budget. So we're going to make sure it has the tools that it needs, and I don't want to outright limit what that may look like. Obviously, we've flown the money to be able to build both navigation centers, and then we'll keep examining over the next year, make sure we got in that right budget spot. But what I want to stress is it won't need more money. We're going to utilize it within our existing budget.
As for the working of the navigation center, Premier, how do you think it's going to be different from Edmonton, or is it going to be the same as Edmonton? Is the center going to go and look out for people, or is it just going to be waiting for people to show up here and get the services?
I suspect what will happen, as happened in Edmonton, is that once people understood, because it took us a little while to figure out the piece around the ID and how important that was and how to get it quickly, because normally you'd get a temporary ID and then you'd have to wait 6 weeks to be able to get a card. Once we figured out how to do on-site printing and put it in a plastic bag so that it was protected while they were waiting for their permanent card to arrive, I think word got out because everyone knows that that is an essential piece to be able to get access to all the other services that they need, whether it's healthcare, whether it's housing, whether it's income supports. So I would anticipate that there will probably be the kind of acute need from time to time that the minister was talking about, but the very fact that we're opening this one with fewer overnight beds, I think that suggests that the nature of the problem is a little bit different. Once word gets out that the ID piece is going to be able to be received here, I think we'll get more people who are looking for that kind of ID. And then I would anticipate as well that in partnership with those who are providing transitional and long-term supportive housing, that's going to be the next stage. We also had a large number of people who had access to the virtual opioid dependency program as well. So people who want to be able to get Suboxone or Sublocade as on the spot so that they can get immediate service. I suspect that is going to be one of the services that will be used. And as we start developing out our recovery communities, being able to connect the individuals to more of a long-term in-house peer support treatment. The ones we have in Red Deer and Lethbridge are 6 to 12 months is how long people can stay, so that then they can get support from reconnection with family, as well as learning job skills so that they can be attached to employment at the end. So we look at this as part of the continuum of all of that. Did you want to comment a little bit more about the differences?
Yeah, well, I think the Premier's answer is exactly right, not just because she's the Premier, it's because she's right. But the Edmonton situation, again, was brought in to deal with a crisis. A true crisis was taking place in that city, is now pivoted into something that would be much more similar to what we're building now in Calgary, about reacting to the day-to-day life of coordinating this huge social services apparatus that is working on the streets inside both the largest cities, right? That includes nonprofits, it includes my department, it includes other departments, brings them together to work on it. I think one of the things that we're going to do, I don't mind foreshadowing today, is that as we see this come along and we see more and more of the Alberta Recovery Program come into place through Minister Williams' department, the Department of Mental Health and Addictions, we will likely then start to use the Navigation Center to work with our shelter providers to help navigate into that system even more. So I envision a day eventually where the DI, the drop-in center, or the mustard seat, or the Salvation Army will slowly send over maybe 10 or 15 individuals that they're working with regularly in their shelter system over into this process, and we will help navigate them into that new recovery process. We need a little bit more time because obviously what we're building is very ambitious, but we really see this as a key part of that pre-treatment housing, that pre-treatment connection into what mental health and addictions is going to build.
Thank you.
Megan Cobb, Global News. One of the perks of going last is most of your questions have been asked. But just building on that last one, I mean, this is a new initiative. I know Calgary and Edmonton are apples and oranges. We've touched on the fact that this is in response to different things. But given that it is new, any lessons learned over the last 5-6 months in Edmonton that you plan on applying to Calgary?
I think some of the lessons that we learned in Edmonton was that we were going to see a lot more drop-in than we thought. Again, when we were originally structuring this, it was thought to be something to deal with when encampments were coming down, the buses drive people there. So we have to build an infrastructure that is stable and is going to be in place regularly, because this will be utilized a lot more. Particularly, actually, this location here in Calgary is going to be very accessible to this population. I also think that what we learned was that we got to make sure that we have access to stronger mental health and addiction supports right there in the Navigation Center. So we certainly had access originally to be connected to Minister Williams' department when we opened up the Navigation Center, but there's a lot of work that can actually take place right there on the spot on the addiction side, and we want to make sure that we're bringing in the proper recovery coaches and different components of the work that Minister Williams is doing. And you know, this is something, I took all of the CEOs from Calgary recently to tour our first, CEOs I should say, the homeless shelters in the province, to tour our first addiction treatment facility in Red Deer that has been built by Mental Health and Addictions. And then I took them all out for lunch, and we talked about the changing role of what's going to take place on the shelter side as we connect to that. This is very different, right? You know, I spoke about my time at the Mustard Seed. We never would have dreamed when I was at the Mustard Seed that there would be a government investing this much into recovery. And so what that means is we now have to take a step back in that field and say, how do we connect to that? And I don't think we have the full answers to that question, but those are some of the things I think we're learning as we go through the Navigation Center, that this is about trying to get to that recovery process. This is going to be the vessel for the organizations that do an excellent job at caring for people in emergency situations, but that vessel to get them into long-term recovery.
Yeah. And you may have more to say about the Indigenous partnership, because we've got a great partnership with Enoch First Nation and Chief Cody Thomas. They're building a recovery community so that they can have Indigenous aspects of healing. We're working the same way with Chief Ori Crowfoot and Siksika, and so I would imagine that that partnership is also going to lend itself to some new learning about how to collaboratively deal with a more remote nation as well. I mean, I suspect we'll probably have also some connection with Tsuut'ina, but Siksika I think is going to be a bit more remote. One of the things that we heard from the nations is that don't just export your problem back to where we are, because we need people who are recovered too. So that's why the partnership works so well, is that we're all invested in making sure that people get well, but doing so in a way that relies on some of the Indigenous learning and support also. Did you want to comment on that, Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor. So one thing that was brought up earlier was language. You know, for people, one thing, when we're deep in our addiction, we're disconnected from our spirit, ourselves, our community, our family. But one thing that immediately connects us is language. So when we have, you know, Calgary is kind of like a hub of many First Nations. You know, there's, you know, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, the ones around in Alberta. So, you know, there's a lot of languages that, you know, that we're going to have to, I guess, learn. Just simple language like uki, that's hello. You know, tsanadapi, how are you doing? Once we hear that, our spirit connects, and we're more connected. So just those little things, you know, other languages in Cree and Stoney and Dene and, you know, all these other languages out there is going to really help us. So in speaking with the partnership, yes, very grateful that the government has you know, gifted us with a recovery center, and also down the line an overnight shelter. So these resources are so crucial. When we first started this task force, when myself and another member were sitting with all the ministers, we said, well, if you want our people off the streets, we got to have them someplace safe to go that's going to start them on a new journey, not just put them at another place. You know, so all these initiatives are so important to help our people break that cycle. Whether it's this place, they go to an overnight shelter where we get connected, and then eventually, as Minister and Mayor said, Premier, sorry, you know, recovery center, where we have long-term programming and connection back to our community, back to our traditions, our ways, our elders, our families, and everything else. So it's a great partnership with, you know, great opportunities. Okay.
All right. Yeah, no,
Perfect.
okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
No,
there's
yeah,
more?
we have a few more on the phones, actually. Just time for one or two more questions here. Operator, could you put through the first caller, please?
Miriam Valdez Carletti, CTV. Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, my question is for the minister. I was just wondering if you could give an update on the Edmonton Center and just, either the successes or, failures or things that could be done better as you are opening a new center in Calgary.
Well, as I was saying in my original speaking notes, we've seen some pretty significant numbers. I think the number that I'll emphasize for you specifically in Edmonton is almost 1,000 people that have gone on to some sort of housing and are no longer in a spot where they're sleeping rough or in circumstances that are extremely dangerous. And the statistics that the department keeps giving me back is of those 1,000, almost 97% of them are still housed afterwards, meaning only 3% of them seem to be ending up back sleeping rough. So, it's only been a few months, so we're going to have to watch how that progresses. And the other thing is, it doesn't surprise me as somebody who worked with the homeless population in the past, but I think it surprised a lot of people in the department how important that ID has been and how significant that uptake has been. We have issued almost 1,200 pieces of identification to the people that have been living on the streets in the city of Edmonton. And that, I cannot stress, is the key to opening up so many other services, including even getting prescriptions for medical needs that you may need, or getting your taxes filed, which may get you access to resources that you never thought of, or being able to get on the income supports inside my department. So again, we're going to watch over the next 6-7 months as both these navigation centers develop, and we will adjust to any circumstances that we're learning from. But what we are very confident in is that this needs to be a permanent type of organization that exists within our largest cities to help all of our organizations navigate together to be able to help the people that we're trying to jointly help.
Thank you. And I do have one follow-up. I spoke with two local homelessness groups in Edmonton, and they're heavily criticizing the Navigation Center in Edmonton. They say that many of these services already exist, and money for the center could be going towards them, saying that they're a better fit to help the people, knowing them personally. For example, the Boyle Street, having that location closed down, looking for a new location. What are your thoughts on this? They're very unhappy with the Navigation Center and not happy to see it now expanding in Calgary.
Well, I'll give my thoughts and then I'll let the minister comment. I would say that we just have to look at the success of the Navigation Center to realize that we can't go back to the way we had it before. We can't go back to making those who are most vulnerable wander around to 9 or 10 different agencies to get all the services that they need. We can't have them waiting 6 weeks to get ID before they can go and get medical care. We have partnered with all of the groups that are providing all those great services and providing a one-window access to all of them. So I look at what we're doing as a value added from a coordination point of view, especially since the minister is able to absorb that within his existing budget. And I just quite frankly think we're the only ones who can do it. We're the only ones who can navigate between multiple different jurisdictions, partnerships with nations, as well as the multitude of different departments at the provincial level that need to be navigated. This is 7 different ministries that came together on this. This is core provincial work. And so I think we had done work before in just being a funding partner, and it wasn't getting us the outcomes that we wanted. This has already shown that it's getting the outcomes that we wanted, and I don't think we would want to turn the clock back on that. Minister?
Yeah, and look, in regards to the organization you're referring to, I think it's important to stress that, we will always listen to others' opinions. This is not an organization that provides one service to the homeless in the city of Edmonton. And so we are working closely with organizations that work with the homeless who have given us strong feedback that they like this approach and they think it's working and having a significant value. And I will also point out that when this process started in early January, there were 700 plus encampments in the city of Edmonton. People were losing their lives, unfortunately, in those encampments. They found themselves in spots where they were being burned to death inside tents because of having to try to heat those tents. They were in circumstances where they were being brutally abused by gangs and other circumstances inside those encampments. And if anybody thinks that process has not worked, I would encourage them to take a walk in the Ice District in Edmonton right now as we watch the Stanley Cup playoffs, or down Jasper Avenue, where you'll see that there has been a significant difference in the city. There's a much more safe for individuals utilizing the city, and we've been able to get the individuals from those encampments to compassionate, real services that are providing them things like long-term housing. I think that result speaks for itself. In regards to the duplication issue, You know, the Calgary Homeless Foundation chaired a committee, including the CBO, the community-based organization Homer Trust from Edmonton and others that were on that committee, where they gave recommendations to the minister. Several of those recommendations were around 24-hour shelters and other components that we've already implemented. But one of those recommendations was for the government of Alberta to stand in a way that, exactly like we're doing, to be able to bring all those resources together in one spot and to help everybody work together as a team to be able to help individuals that are on the streets. And I would submit to you that this navigation center that we're doing does exactly that.
We're going to have to hop off to the next question here. We just have time for one more question. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Rick Bell, Calgary Sun.
Post media, but that was the Calgary Sun. A question for the Premier. On your radio show last weekend, you were asked about auto insurance, and you gave, a pretty thorough answer. You said that in the fall you'll be looking at a couple of different options. So my first question for the follow-up is, have you absolutely, unconditionally ruled out the government auto insurance or public auto insurance option for Alberta? And if so, why? And if not, why? And that's my first question.
I can tell you that the sticker shock of bringing through a fully publicly funded auto insurance program in Alberta made all the ministers' eyes pop. It's something like $3 billion that we would need to set it up and capitalize it. And in addition to that, I think we would lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 jobs in the private sector, which is not something we're inclined to do. We like the ability to have a free enterprise market with a lot of players, but we're still trying to navigate how we get to that. How do we deal with the issue of escalating cost of repairs? How do we deal with the escalating cost of litigation? How do we make sure that when there are profits, they get shared back to the policy payers? So we've done some new guidelines around that. There's more that we need to do, but we just launched a major consultation 2 weeks ago to try to get that feedback. But I would say that the appetite for a full Alberta-run public insurance system is very low. I wouldn't anticipate that would very likely be the result that would emerge from this consultation.
Given that fact, and given the fact that despite all the startup costs, that system would provide substantial savings. Trust me, I'm from Manitoba originally. But if that's off the table, and other things are on the table, like a no-fault insurance, which you did talk about, so I'm not going to ask you about that. But I'm going to ask you, how do you ensure, pardon the pun, how do you ensure that these insurance companies actually deliver substantial, significant, we're talking about hundreds of dollars a year, premium reductions to Alberta drivers? How can you ensure that happening while preserving the free enterprise insurance system? Because, quite frankly, a lot of Albertans, as you know, do not trust the insurance companies to pass on the savings.
Well, you identified the exact problem, that when you look at the systems around the world, it's the no-fault systems that deliver the hundreds of dollars in savings that you're talking about. And no fault doesn't mean no pay. It means that if you get into an accident, there's a schedule of payments so that you don't end up having your day in court. So there are a lot of Albertans who don't like that idea. There's a lot of Albertans who are prepared to pay the extra dollars so that if they do end up, heaven forbid, in a terrible accident, they can hold somebody accountable through the legal process. So that's exactly the consultation that we're having right now, is are there ways of bringing in choice so that those who want to opt in to a schedule of payments have the ability to do that and get a lower premium, while those who want to have the choice of the full tort accept that it's going to cost a little bit more. So I'm looking forward to getting the feedback, where it's very robust from both the trial lawyers as well as the insurance companies. And I don't want to prejudge the outcome, but that's exactly what we're consulting on right now.
Perfect. Thank you. And that'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you, everybody, for
what was
joining us.
It's okay? Fantastic. Thank you.